Hey mamas, and welcome. Today we are going to be planning for the month of February, and linked below in the description are some free planning worksheets that you can use to help you review the month of January and then plan ahead for the month of February. If you have used any of my planning worksheets from previous months, you'll notice just a few changes to the current one. So I wanted to not just do homeschool reflection and planning, but extend that into personal review and planning. So that is the addition that I've made to the current planning worksheets, and I also changed up some of the visuals as well. So please leave me a comment below and let me know how it works out for you. All right, mamas, the first thing we're going to do is note all of our important dates. And if you have seen my previous planning videos, you'll know that I just use a very simple planner like this, and then I keep most of my dates and things like that on my digital calendar that I share with my husband. So the way that I use this itty bitty planner is I don't really note things in the monthly spreads, but I more focus on the weekly spreads. So if you'll notice here, they have different lines and portions of the pages for each week, and that is where I will write down all of those important dates. That's how I like to do it, because in this space I also like to time block on the right hand side and then write all of my to-dos and priority tasks on the left hand side. All right, now that we have noted all of those important dates, we can go ahead and start reviewing the month of January. As far as homeschooling goes, let's start by writing down all of our highlights and accomplishments. For me, this past month of January has been very slow and easy, so we don't have any major accomplishments that are worth noting in this section. And I would say that a major highlight for us has just been taking it easy, taking it slow, and just enjoying this winter season with all that it brings. Next, we're going to write down some of the things that we've learned from this past month. For me, this is a little bit more personal, and that is the fact that time is very precious and it is more fleeting than I think. And sometimes I want to get through the day and move on to just the winding down process, because I'm an introvert. I love to do that, but I forget to have joy in the mundane things that come along with homeschooling. So I want to make sure that I am doing that a little bit better in the future, really taking advantage of sitting and being with my kids. Now let's take a moment to think about and write down all of our observations about our children and our homeschool from this past month. One of the first observations that stand out to me was seeing my daughter Selah come alive with the visual arts. And this is something that I know and I've seen in her and I've mentioned in other videos, but she is just so excited to learn more about how to paint and draw and sculpt and do all of those things. And so I really want to make sure I take note of that, because that's going to inform some of the things that we do in the future as far as homeschooling activities. For my middle daughter, Solana, she is starting to flip-flop in her desire to do that written work, and I think that's mostly because of the influence of her older sister, who does not like to do sit-down written work, but she definitely still loves to do it. And I think one of the things that she is really taking off on is her reading. I noticed that she's not only sounding out the things that she kind of knows how to sound out, but she's also trying the harder things, which I didn't expect her to do. So I'm really excited to see how she continues to grow and flourish as far as her reading goes. Now let's move on to writing down some observations that we've made about curriculum, activities, and resources that we have used this past month. And this is a space where you can just really focus on highlighting things that really worked well, some favorites of yours, and things that maybe didn't go so well for you this past month. We have come back to first language lessons as our grammar grammar curriculum for my oldest child. And this is something really geared towards first graders, and we did introduce it last year when she was in first grade, but I decided to stop doing it then because it wasn't really working at the time. Now that we have picked it up though, I've decided to make some tweaks here and there so that it becomes a little bit more interactive for my daughter, and she's really enjoying it so far. The other thing that I like about it is that we have been able to do more than one lesson at a time, and that's been really helpful for us to move through the curriculum a little bit faster. The next thing we're going to take note of are the books that we have loved from this past month. My son has been obsessed with a book called The Little Blue Truck, and I can definitely share more details about that book in my homeschool update. And my daughters, as always, love to read Disney books. So we also received some Disney books from our neighbor recently, and they have been completely into that. All right, mamas, this next page in the printable is gonna focus on you. So we're going to review this past month and just think about how things are going with ourselves. So the very first thing we're going to write down are how are we progressing with the goals that we made this past month. For me, one of the biggest goals was to take risks and let go of my personal insecurities as a mom, as a woman, as a wife, and a creative person. This has been very challenging, but I see things getting better and better as each day passes, and I make the decision to lean on the Lord for guidance and to lean on Him to be able to release the things that are holding me back. This next prompt is exactly the same as our homeschooling prompt. So we're gonna think about things that we've learned and specifically for ourselves. For me, I've really started to learn that it is possible to change and really be wholly transformed from the inside out. This has been so helpful for me to understand because it goes along with what I just mentioned about being able to take risks and let go of all of my insecurities. The next area that we're going to write down and think about are some self-observations. I personally feel like I am starting to turn a new page for the aspects of my life that I just reflected on. But I still have some tendencies to go and have experiences on a mountaintop. So really exciting experiences either with the Lord or with my homeschool, whatever it may be. And then I find myself kind of crashing down after that, and almost like if you had the visual of a mountaintop like sliding down this steep side of the mountain. And I'm just trying to learn how to pace myself in all of those mountaintop experiences so that I can linger in the joy of that place and that time. Next, let's write down how we have taken care of ourselves for the month of January. One of the things that I recently introduced this past month was working out, and specifically working out with my husband. So this has been a lot of fun, but it's also really challenging to be consistent with, and that's something that I'm going to continue working on in this coming month of February. The other thing is I am happy to say I have been able to maintain my routines and maintain all the basics that really help to take me through my day. So things like showering, and making sure that I am dressed and ready for the day. Those are some basic things that I would say a year ago were really, really challenging for me. So I'm happy that as I reflect on this past month, that I was still able to maintain some of those basic things that really help to take me through the day and also help me to enjoy the day. Now let's write down some of our book favorites from this past month. I'm going to be perfectly honest and say that I have not been able to pick up a book to read this past month. And I know some of us maybe have made goals for reading and things like that. I actually have not made any of those goals, but this is something that I want to start doing. And so I'm making note of it here that I did not read any books this past month outside of, the typical read alouds that I do with my kids. And so I want to make sure that I take that with me and do that in the next month. All right, mamas, now that we have reviewed the month of January, we're going to dive into planning for the month of February. Thing we're going to take note of are all the goals and tasks that we want to accomplish for this coming month. My top goals and tasks as far as homeschooling goes are: number one, to bring back binder time, singing, read aloud, that whole morning time. The reason why I want to do this is because my oldest daughter was very adamant about bringing back this circle time, this morning time that we had together. She just came up to me and said, "Mommy, I really miss having that time to sing with you and do the weather and go through, all of the different things that have to do with the day." So we're going to be reintroducing that back. And I just need to make sure I have a solid plan of when to introduce this. I have to get the binders ready and set to go and choose different books and devotionals, things like that we can do together in the morning. The next goal I have is to figure out some wonderful ways that we can celebrate Black History Month and Valentine's Day. So for me, the first thing I want to make sure I get done is find some books from the library that we can use for this celebration, then create some fun activities to accompany us studying Black history and celebrating Valentine's Day. And last but not least, I had an idea about an activity, which was to write and read about a person each day as we celebrate Black History Month, and write a thank you card and some questions that have to do with what they did or who they were. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see how that goes with my kids. Next, we're going to think about some commitments. And this part always gets a little blurred between my personal life and homeschooling. So, the first thing that's a yes for me that kind of overlaps with homeschooling and will definitely affect the amount of time that I'm going to be spending planning for homeschool is teaching a class. The last commitment that we're saying yes to is having specific library and art days across each homeschool week. And this is important because I am planning for this to be taking up about a half a day of homeschooling. So that is definitely going to affect what we can accomplish that day outside of those visits and activities. The next thing you can write down are fun outings that you want to plan to do with your kids for homeschooling. For us, again, we're going to do the library. I'm also hoping to do some fun nature walks when it's not, below zero outside. The next thing you can write down, if you so choose, is remember to. And this is something that can be very specific to a task or something that you need to accomplish for the month. But for me, I'm just writing down, remember to cherish every moment, even the hard ones. And then finally, you can go ahead and write down inspirational quotes at the bottom of the page that you're going to take with you across the month. And for me, I'm writing down specifically for homeschool, Psalm 19:14, which says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer." I love this verse for our homeschool because I want to start introducing devotionals for my kids to do on a daily basis. Next, we're going to write down our top goals and tasks for ourselves this month. And for me, I want to exercise 4 to 5 times a week. I'm kind of thinking that this might be a little bit of a stretch. We'll see how it goes. The other thing I want to accomplish is eating a more balanced diet. So that means that I have to make sure, as far as grocery shopping goes, to avoid processed foods, and making sure that I'm tracking my eating on a daily basis and choosing meals ahead of time and enjoy the process of choosing those meals. Last but not least is resetting my sleep schedule. So this is something that I have struggled so much with in the past, but recently I've been able to be a little bit more consistent about my sleep. So getting those 8 hours a day and trying to wake up between 6:30 and 7 o'clock and going to bed between 10:30 and 11 o'clock. Now let's move on to talking about, again, our commitments, but our personal commitments. So like I mentioned before, these kind of overlap with some of my homeschool commitments, but one of the things I wanted to add for my personal commitment is that I'm saying yes to weekly meetups with friends, whether that be in person or on Zoom or FaceTime. It's important for me to do this because when I am not doing this, I find myself in isolation and I don't really feel like I'm full because I'm not maintaining those relationships. Now let's write down some of the outings that we want to do for ourselves this coming month. I want to make sure that I go on a date with my husband and that can be anywhere, walking through a park or, getting drive-through and sitting in our car and eating. I don't care what it is, but I want to be able to get out and just be with my husband. The next thing we can write down is a remember to for ourselves. And this kind of goes along with what I already wrote for my homeschooling, but I want to remember to take it slow and not rush things because life is short enough as it is. For me, my personal inspirational quote for this coming month is from Romans 12:2, and it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." I think this speaks to all the things that I mentioned already, all the things that I reflected on, and I know that it's going to carry me into this month of February, giving me hope in what I have chosen to do, what I'm deciding to do as far as being obedient to the Lord. Last but not least, I have a bonus page for you, and it highlights all of the different ways to rest. So in my previous homeschool update, I talked about how I want to be committed to resting. And there are 7 different ways that you can rest. One of them is physical, so we can write that down. And examples include movement and sleeping. For me, again, I have chosen to exercise with my husband. And the other thing I want to do is take naps when my body tells me to. The next way to rest is mental, so taking brain breaks and doing brain dumps, things like that. I love doing brain dumps. I have a running list of ideas and things that I constantly just add to on a daily basis. And then I want to make sure that when I'm doing my brain breaks that I am stretching my body and massaging myself so that I can really make sure that I have a moment to regain my focus and get my eyes off of screens because I use a lot of screens for the work that I do. The next area of rest is emotional. So this includes things like journaling, affirmations, gratitude, etc. For me, I really love to journal to get all of my ideas and feelings and emotions out on the page. The other thing that I want to do more intentionally this coming month is to talk things out with people that I love and trust. Next is social rest. So this includes making sure you're spending intentional time with loved ones. And for me, this goes along with what I just mentioned about talking to people that I trust. But extended to that is making sure that I'm spending time with those people as well. So I mentioned before that I want to make sure I have those weekly check-ins and meetups with my friends. But another thing that I want to do is go shopping with my mom. This is something my mom and I absolutely love to do, and it helps us to just feel a little bit more refreshed, do some shop therapy. Sometimes it's mostly window shopping, but it's really fun to do with my mom. So I'm looking forward to that. Then Then we have sensory rest, and that really is just unplugging, avoiding overstimulation, things like that. So I want to do my best to limit screen time to just an hour or two a day. It's really challenging for me to do that because I'm here on YouTube and I'm trying to figure out all the social medias and things like that. But I want to make sure that I am limiting my screen time so that I'm not getting that overstimulation. I also want to escape all of the sensory overload by being creative. So that goes right into this next way of rest, and that is creative. So expressing yourself, appreciating others' creative work. And so I love to paint, and it is something that is so soothing for me. I also like to play the piano and create and do these videos. I really, really love to do that. Last but not least is spiritual. So now let's write down some of the things we want to do for our soul. For me, I want to do devotionals every single morning. And when I do those devotionals, it really does fill me with peace. It fills me with that blessed assurance that I know God has me. He is holding me. He is holding my family. And the other thing I'm doing, so this kind of goes along with the sensory rest, is fasting from social media. So I have committed myself to fasting for the first half of the day from social media completely. Sometimes it's really hard, but I really think that for me it's important to do so that I can have a little bit more self-control. And then just being still, like learning how to be still with the Lord, to shut everything off, shut everything out, and just listen. Mamas, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that this time planning with me has been helpful for you. Take care, be blessed, and I'll see you in the next one.